Awesome. No mai and haere mai and welcome to, I guess, the first kind of learning lunch of this official webinar series, amplifying and highlighting the 5 pathways for positive and inclusive, impactful system change from a community-led perspective. So yeah, welcome to this online Kōrero panel discussion with SASS on enabling systems change leadership. We've got our wonderful speakers here, Jahvaya, Wheki, Jane Zintl, and Ualesi as well. And yeah, thank you for joining the SASS group for this. Oh, it actually isn't necessarily the Scaling Deep one. We actually had Scaling Deep earlier this year with the System Sanctuary crew looking at their Scaling Deep research. This is the second webinar of our Lunch and Learn series, and really looking at the 5 pathways for building more positive and impactful systems change. But before we get started, I'll start with a karakia. Me karakia tātou. Ko te kawa o runga, ko te kawa o raro, ko te kawa ora, ko te kawa ora. E rongo e whakaerehia ki runga, turuturu o whiti whakamaua ki a tina, tina, hui e, tā ki e. Apologies, I forgot to introduce myself. Ni hao leiho kia ora koutou, ko Jade Tang-Taylor. I wear lots of, he tangata te riti aho. I wear lots of different hats, but today I'm proudly representing the SASS Rōpū as a SASS member. SASS stands for Systems Change, Advocacy and Solidarity and Support for Systems Change. And it's really a collective that has been working together for a few years now. I'll share a bit more about SASS in a little bit, and our non-white paper that was released, which had the 5 pathways, which this is highlighting pathway number 1. We'll then start to introduce our wonderful panel speakers as well. They'll be sharing a bit about themselves, their mahi, and also their systems that they're hoping to shift and change. And then we'll allow for time for some pātai, some questions that you might have, and then share some upcoming SASS webinars that we also have coming up. So feel free to use the chat and pop your comments in and pop your questions in there too. And then we're hoping to wrap up and say thank you with a closing karakia by 1 p.m. So this is how the Zoom's going to work. You would have noticed that this webinar is being recorded and will be sent out via email along with the slide deck and also links to upcoming webinars. This is my first time doing this, so I'm really... Oh, and please keep yourself on mute if you can. Please use the chat function to comment. Would love to see your smiling faces as well. So feel free to turn your video on if you're comfortable and not eating lunch. And if you haven't already, would love to hear a bit about you, your name, where you're zooming in from, and what system or systems are you hoping to shift or change as well. There's already some amazing systems that are being shared across the chat. A bit about SASS, as mentioned, it was a rōpū that was started probably 12 to 18 months ago. Initially was connected via Anjum, Jane, Anissa and Bianca, kind of coming together and meeting on a more, I guess, regular basis online. And then it evolved into a bit more of a 6-month to 12-month annual retreats as well for systems change leaders across the motu. We also launched a bit of a non-white paper about, I think, May last year. What was last year? 2023. And it's really a gift to everyone who's passionate about creating more equitable, inclusive, te tiriti-based Aotearoa, whether you work in systems change or support it. There should be a link to the report if in the chat, but feel free, Storm, if you wouldn't mind popping the link to the chat in the chat, that would be amazing. And for those that haven't read the report yet. But today we're focusing on pathway 1, which is really about enabling systems change leadership. And we've got some amazing leaders in the room today sharing their lived experience and expertise with us. But pathway 1, what is it all about? I'm not going to read all of this because there's too many words, but it's also all in the report as well. But leading a systems change initiative is a marathon, not a sprint, and the work can take a high toll of everyone involved. So how might we create enabling systems for greater system change leadership to flourish and to evolve over time? And what can you do about it as well? Understanding that it can be really challenging on this road. There's some wonderful ideas for system change practitioners, but also for funders and other supporters of system change too. But also really mindful of time. Feel free to, again, head to the report to find out more. But would really love to introduce our amazing speakers for you today, because you're not here to listen to me, you're here to hear from wonderful speakers. First up, I'm going to be introducing them all, and then I'm going to hand the raka over to them. But first up, we have Jahvaya Wheki. Jahvaya works as the relationship lead at Seed Waikato and Seeds for Change, where she focuses on mapping the systems change sector to help rangatahi see the places they can go to enact change. As a Māori wahine on her reconnection journey, she dances in a lot of spaces, and in between that are also learning alongside her. And she is passionate about meeting awesome people and using language to travel to new realms of understanding and connecting. Next up, we have Jane Zintl, who is a CE for Aotearoa, which is the peak body for youth development in Aotearoa. With over 30 years of experience in the sector, her passion aligns with the vision of Aotearoa, to see an empowered ecosystem of youth development that supports young people to thrive. And last but not least, we have Ualesi, who is clear on her calling, is to support leaders of change in their calling. She established CALLED, a response to leaders' requests for support in actioning systems change and community-led design and innovation. Annie is proudly Aotearoa born, Samoan Chinese. She is a regular teacher at Academy EX, which we've also connected on, which is formerly the Mind Lab, and a pre-approved coach with Leadership Development Centre of Te Kawa Mata Aho Public Service Commission. And she's also Edmund Hillary Fellow, a selected community of global innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors who are committed to Aotearoa, New Zealand as a base camp for global impact, which is also another area that we connected with. Anyway, please give them a virtual round of applause, and would love to welcome Jah as our first speaker.
Kia ora, thank you, Jade. Can everyone hear me? Testing, testing. Woo! He piko he taniwha, he piko he taniwha. Kia ora tātou. He mokopuna aho no Ngā Te Haua, rawa ko Ngā Te Koro ki Kahukura. Kei te noho aho ki Kirikiriroa, ko au he kaimahi I Seed Waikato. So I'm curious to know if anyone knows about Seed Waikato. Give some love, do some reactions in the chat if I can see if you have heard of us before. But Seed Waikato started back in 2017. And essentially, Seed Waikato kind of started in the ways of networking, and it was mainly focused in a lot of privileged spaces. As we've gone on our hiding as a community organisation, what we've really found was through COVID, creating more wellbeing spaces and spaces of healing to help rangatahi with mental health. And now we've kind of changed a lot more. Seed Waikato has always been prominent in political spaces, and it was in those spaces when I came on board in 2022 that we found that young people do care about stuff and they do want to make a difference. And so it was from those initial conversations that Seeds for Change was born. If you could please go to the next slide. So Seeds for Change was started as a collective where we wanted to find out who is in the system. We wanted to help rangatahi know where they could go to if they wanted to enact change. And so what I've been doing is having interviews with a variety of different organisations that are practicing systemic change across the whole motu, and started creating a map, a kumu map specifically, to pinpoint where rangatahi can go to if they need help. And interwoven into this journey is a whole learning of self, and my haidinga through Seeds for Change and learning more about systems change. I think if we could break down the pātai, what I see is a couple of aspects. I see enabling, understanding what enabling means. I see understanding what systemic change means. And I also see an opportunity for understanding what leadership is. So here are some pikitia that represent me on my haidinga through Seeds for Change and also through my personal journey. There's so much to talk about. And so I guess the key pivotal point for me that has really been centric through this mahi has really been my reconnection journey back to myself and back to my whenua. It was only last year that I learnt my pepeha through embarking on Te Tohu Paitahi. And it was from that haidinga that I really found a lot of gems and support from Seed Waikato, who also embarked on that journey as well alongside me. What I'm starting to sense make in the systems change space is more of a commitment and alignment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and seeing a lot of communities and organisations embarking to understand what it means. As a Māori in this space, it comes with its challenges, of course. I guess my whole life I've embarked on in that liminal realm of understanding how I can further understand and learn more. And I think Seeds for Change has been an outlet or a space in which I can practice my listening and practice connecting with others. And so it's kind of in that space of connection and of relationship building that I've come to grow and meet amazing people like SASS and like a lot of people that are in this group chat today. So that's a little bit about me. I could have taken it everywhere, but I just wanted to have that initial kōrero. So kia ora, over to you, Jane.
Mauri ora ki te tui, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Thanks, Jade, so much for opening us up. Thank you so much for being speaker number one. I feel enormously inspired to be holding space with this group of awesome wahine in this cool online, what do we call this thing we're in? Lunchtime seminar series. Ko waio, no rukeno aho, ko Rose Viti-Motu, ko Atlantic Te Moana, ko Rose Rawa, ko Roa Thoku Tupuna, he tangata Tiriti aho, no te upuka o te ika ho, ko Jane Zintl tōku ingoa. So I whakapapa the pre-anglicised name for Cornwall in the UK was Kurno, and the Cornish language is one that is in the journey of being revitalised. And on my mother's side, I whakapapa to Wales. And there's some other interesting little stories that take me all over that part of the world. But I'm very proud and blessed to be born here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and to discover more of who I am in the context of my tupuna. I was just going to share a little bit about Aotearoa, which is the organisation I work for. So on the next slide, more important than what we do is who we are. So this is some of the whānau of Aotearoa. You'll see underneath our name, we're the peak body for youth development in Aotearoa. And we are a group of humans made up of a whole bunch of people who work with young people through the motu. So lots of them are young themselves. And the youth development sector is, in my opinion, one of the coolest sectors in Aotearoa, and we've got lots and lots of grassroots youth workers and others who work with young people. So the top right, the kaumātua and the kaihotu of Aotearoa since we started as an organisation in 2010. And late last year, we gathered this whānau together, and we really wanted to record the whakapapa of Aotearoa and the pūrākau that ground us in where we are now. And so they've taken longer to edit than would be ideal, but we're expecting to release our whakapapa videos over the next few months in little snippets, so that those stories, A, don't get lost, but B, can ground us as we move forward. In the bottom right, you'll see a combination of our board, our kaimahi, the kaiarahi of Ngā Kaihui, which is the network of Māori who work with rangatahi. So a bunch of people who I won't name in person, but that gives you a sense of some of the humans that make up the core, not the core, that make up the engine room of Aotearoa, but across the motu, we're connected to over 3,000 people who work with young people, doing incredible mahi on the ground, often unseen. In fact, we'd often say the best youth work is invisible to everybody but rangatahi and their whānau. And so if we do our job right, you will see young people doing great. And it's only when things fall over that youth work becomes more visible. On the next slide, you'll see, and it was in my intro as well, we just changed our mission statement, and I love it. So our vision is an empowered ecosystem of youth development that supports rangatahi to thrive. Previous vision, and it only changed 1st of July. Our previous vision really focused on the thriving of rangatahi, and I think this goes to the core of systems change. All our members are doing that. They're doing incredible work. Young people themselves and youth workers and others are doing incredible work to see young people do great. And sometimes fighting a system that seems to just want to completely go counter to that. And it was important for Aotearoa that our vision wasn't the same as that of our members, because actually if somebody's not working to shift and change the ecosystem that the youth sector operates within, then we'll continue on the churning wheel that kind of has everybody working really, really hard, and sometimes not only not getting far, but sometimes going backwards. And the thing in our sector is that impacts lives. That impacts the lives of rangatahi whānau communities. And the best example of that we've seen in most recent time would be the Royal Commission report into abuse in state and faith care that came out last week. So we're really passionate about the ecosystem that supports young people, including young people themselves, and ensuring that that is empowered. So that's a little bit about Aotearoa, and I will pass the rākau on.
Thanks, Jane and Ja. I lau susunga le MC Jade ma le au SASS, whaaftaitele mo le nei awanoa, o te whaatalo whatu i le anganga whaaloalo, tālofa, tālofa, tālofa lava, e mumua le vi inga I le atua. To our host Jade and SASS, Jane and Ja, thank you for the opportunity and for being part of our sharing today. I begin by giving praise to God. Please bear with me as I will be reading from my notes. I'm an introvert at heart, and reading from pre-prepared notes enables me to speak publicly and keep on time. Those of you who know me also know that I am an emotional being, and the tears are already flowing. Tālofa lava and kia ora tātou. O lo ingo o Annie Purcell Ualesi, Koaio. I am a daughter of the migration. Next slide. Thanks, Jade. And by that I mean that my grandparents came to Aotearoa in the 1950s. They were founding members of the first Pacific Island Church in Aotearoa, the Pacific Island Presbyterian Church of Newton, just off K Road in Tāmaki, Makaurau, if you know it. I'm the daughter of Ngafa Watau William Lesa Purcell, born in Malaila, Alepata, in Samoa, and Emily Singh Mackenzie, born in Vatukola, Fiji. And I'm blessed to live next door to my amazing parents here in Tāmaki, Makaurau. I am Samoan Chinese. I'm married to Faleata, a secondary school teacher and artist at heart. And we are the parents of a smart, savvy, beautiful 14-year-old daughter. Because disrupting systems is a long game, as per a key recommendation of SASS's Voices from the Frontline report, as shared by Jade, I encourage you to ensure you are creating space and time and activities that maintain and enhance your well-being. It's the classic airplane scenario, people. Ensure you have your mask on first so that you continue to be able to care for others. Prioritize the precious time and opportunity you have to bless and be blessed by those closest to you. The world will keep generating new leaders, but you are irreplaceable to your family and loved ones. 5 years ago, I created Called as a response to many individuals and organizations who were asking me for support around systems change, collective impact, and co-design, which I prefer to term, or what I do is community-led design. I'm I'm called to support leaders of change. Next slide, please. As the lead for the Samoan team for the Rheumatic Fever project recently completed, we were able to honour the experiences of Samoans living with rheumatic fever. Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia are the last high-income countries in the world with significant rheumatic fever, and it almost exclusively impacts our Māori and Pacific children and families. A mersina is a treasure that represents something of cultural value and significance. In the context of the Samoan culture, a mersina may be in the form of an iatonga or fine mat, and hosts exchange gifts with guests in recognition and acknowledgement of the relationship, support and contribution of others. As I share really briefly about this work so that you can get a sense of my view of systems change, I do this as I'm sharing the mersina of those families, patients, young people and systems partners who travelled the journey with us. I share on the acknowledgement that you are treasuring their mersina as we have. Next slide. I want to thank and acknowledge Jade. So she actually opened the door to the opportunity for me to work on this piece of work. And as far as we know, it's one of the very few Samoan specific community-led design systems change initiatives in Aotearoa, funded by, well, probably in the world. And also acknowledge Te Whatuora who commissioned this work. And Peter Harrison from Think Place, who held the contract but gave us space as Samoans to push out our view of systems change. The experience, sorry, next slide, please. The experience of young Samoans with rheumatic fever, as part of our work, we captured it, and this is just one slide of the persona of Mālia that was created to represent the voice and experience of young people. And sadly, you'll note the emotions along the bottom are pretty much all negative: lost, bewildered, overlooked, judged. And when we, I guess a point of uniqueness in this work, if you look down the left-hand column, you'll see the picture of the whale. So we unpack well-being and how young people are being impacted using the whānau whale model of holistic well-being, a Samoan perspective. And because we know so many Samoans who are also professionals, we thought, wow, I wonder what their experience is like. It was quite striking. So Amosa was the persona of a Samoan professional across ecosystems that you work in every day: youth development, social services, health, education, housing. And what was surprising was that Amosa's experience mirrored that of Mālia. So our Samoan professionals unvalued, and the cultural and relational expertise that they hold completely invisible to the system. And they were working outside of the system, covering the gaps in the system. So next slide. It's all about, for us, systems change is all about that tale of two systems. So there is one system that is overriding in Aotearoa. It treats our families in most systems, as you can see on the left, this tiny little individual. This process is what's important here. Follow our big important process, little insignificant soul person. And as you can see, our view of systems is completely different and encompasses the power of the collective, the wealth of expertise that is sitting in our families and communities. How do you unlock that as a systems change leader or someone who aims to serve the system in leadership? So final slide. Really, it's about connecting that ecosystem. So as Jane was sharing earlier, right, that new vision for their organisation about how are we drawing together and giving opportunity for leaders across many systems and many parts of the system to really tap into who they are and often the reason they truly jumped into the system. The system has made them become inhuman. And how do we allow them to come back into their fields, come back into their spirit of call and be able to move out in their own view of leadership and in their own way and using their own cultural capital and everything that they hold at their essence to be able to be the leader they were born to be. So thanks again for the opportunity, and look forward to more tala no today. Whaftai.
Oh, talofa lava, Annie, that was amazing. Really love what you shared around, yeah, how do we move from this linear process or system that we're currently in into amplifying the power of the collective and the wealth of and expertise of ainga o whānau and the community as well. Really love, Jao, that you touched on obviously the connection and relationship building and how important that is in terms of enabling systems change. And really excited to learn more and I guess about the pūrākau and the whakapapa o Aotearoa as well, Jane, and what it looks like in terms of a thriving ecosystem for those that are supporting our rangatahi. So if anyone has any thoughts or questions, feel free to pop it in the chat, but we have 3 to start with to get the ball rolling. But any other musings that you might have, please feel free to pop them in. But let's start with why for each of you. And I know that, Annie, you touched on it during your introduction, but why is enabling system change leadership important to you and your mahi?
I guess I want to start with the story around how did I get into this line of mahi. I find it really interesting because I feel as though for me systems change is a way of being. I guess my journey started back in 2012 when I was year 9. I was in high school. I was sitting in science class and I had never done science before and I didn't really know what it was. And so in my curiosity, I endeavored to ask questions to understand what science was. And the teacher didn't answer it, and she kind of started treating me as though, like, you know, there was no understanding as to why we're doing what we're doing. I didn't understand what Bunsen burners were. I just had no idea. So in that exchange, I kind of started to rebel because of the lack of explanation around that help to understanding and to create more awareness around something that could be deemed a lot simple that just wasn't. And so I started to rebel. I started to get kicked out of class. And then as my haidinga went on throughout the year, I had my favorite teachers that I knew I could like be G with. And then I had my other teachers where I was just like, no, I'm not having a bar of it. So I'd get kicked out of class. And then at the end of the school year, I ended up getting stood down for, this is a vulnerable story because I've never shared it before, but I smoked weed on camp. I got kicked out of camp. I got stood down from school. And then when I went back in year 10, I decided to start all over again and restart my life. And so what I noticed on that haidinga from year 10 to year 13 was that I started to get rewarded for my good behavior. And the more that I engaged, the more that I started to see results. So for me, my biggest passion of youth mahi for me was that switch of, okay, what made me get engaged? What was that switch that helped me to become engaged? It's still something that I'm exploring even to this day. I think it's hard to work out what is that switch. But I feel grateful because I think sports saved me participating in badminton and also my grandparents, which were a massive part of that. And then along my haidinga in year 13, I started serving. You had to do volunteer hours, and that's how I joined with the Lions Club. I recognize you, Katie, so kia ora, shout out to the Lions Club. I was in the Lions Club for like 5 years, and that was quite a traditional structure. I kind of want to use the word pale, stale, male, but being respectful in that space. But it was just, in that space, it challenged my way of being. You know, when you were serving, it's completely different because service is there. But in the ways of being, in the difference between culture became recognized, just a whole lot of differences. And so I started to recognize that. And then I was grateful on my haidinga to continue my love for community. And it was from me applying and using the attitude of high school, in which I applied for an Outward Bound scholarship at the YWCA that connected me with volunteering and with staying in tune with the community sector, and so much that, you know, A leads to Z, you meet people and then you get a job. And so I became connected with Seed Waikato, and that's how I got involved with it. On that haidinga, when I look back now, how I got into this line of work was my strong ability to recognize that, like, I'm on my own journey, and I think that we are all on our own journeys in this way. And our beings within the system is really what could help us get to where we want to go to. For me, I was really privileged to kind of never really settle. Like, I have that innate ability to just kind of push against something if it doesn't make sense, and to acquire and to make sense. In the position that I'm in today, I can kind of understand, and what I'm unlearning is that my ability to always go to that between space in spaces is actually due to a result of colonization and perhaps a lot of Indigenous people's experience to always go to that middle ground to try to understand what it's like to go to the other Western way of learning. And so, you know, you've got 3 sections, and I guess what a lot of people tend to do is go to that middle space to bridge that gap, to try to adapt to this way of being. However, in a lot of spaces, it's not reciprocated, because in the Western context, it doesn't have to be reciprocated for others to learn. And so I feel grateful now that we're kind of breaking down those barriers and getting into that space of coming to the middle together, coming to middle grounds. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my kōrero. Kia ora.
Beautiful, Ja. And yes, and I know that within the SASS rōpū as well, we've got there's a wonderful wahine toa called B, and she always talks about how we live in a colonized reality and what does it look like or feel like. And we're always learning and unlearning and relearning when we're working around shifting systems and creating system change as well. Thank you so much for sharing, Ja. Jane, did you want to speak to this, or
Yeah,
did I
happy
just
to.
misread the message?
No, I'm really happy to. Thank you, Ihoa. I love that you started with what got you into systems change, Ja, and I was reflecting on your journey, and it's like quite powerful. And in all honesty, why did I start getting involved in systems change, enabling systems change leadership? Was kind of because the funders started to like the language, and we operate in the not-for-profit sector in a space where, as you know, sort of language changes, and what sits behind that, we can never ignore the mātauranga that informs it, but we actually need to kind of get on board with that so that we're able to continue to access funding, which isn't necessarily as beautiful or as powerful as your story, Ja, but was certainly a motivator in the very, very early days. But as I've already indicated, what sits behind that language, and the reason that a lot of philanthropic funders are supportive of systems change, is because there's a logic that is undeniable. And in our space, I think that most youth workers on the ground and youth development whānau on the ground intuitively understand the brokenness of the system, and intuitively understand what it is to provide on-the-ground support, but as I said earlier, not necessarily see a heck of a lot of change, because there's so much that's working against our rangatahi. And as soon as you put a equity lens over that, so everybody we work with is young themselves, but as soon as an equity lens goes over that, the inequities just increase exponentially. The other question that you put in the chat earlier was, what system do you want to change? And I said, you know, any system that impacts on young people in the youth development sector. The reality is all our systems impact on rangatahi and the youth development sector. And so I think it can get quite overwhelming in that regards. And I mihi to your recognition of the impact of colonisation in this space, and capitalistic thinking and colonized thinking, and if that's informing the systems that we're all trying to navigate, how challenging that is. So why is leadership, enabling systems change leadership now important to me and my mahi? It's undeniable that it's needed. It's flippin' hard work. It feels, I think that was a quote you said earlier, it feels like a marathon. At times it feels overwhelming. And if we don't look after and empower leaders in that space, we're going to be in the same space in 20 years, 40 years, 100 years. Our children's children will still be facing the same thing. And that's not an Aotearoa that I want to leave for those that follow after me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, Jane. So, yeah, very poignant, really powerful words that you shared there. And you're completely right. All systems impact rangatahi as well. And it can get quite overwhelming when you're starting to map out the whole system. I'm literally running a systems thinking masterclass with Peter Harrison, our dear friend, Annie. And so, yeah, I guess focusing on what's in your control, what's out of your control, what can you influence and lean into, and what is what's, you know, what will take collective experience and expertise and to draw on the wealth of the wisdom and whānau and wider communities. I'm going to jump to the second question and then start with you, Annie. In your experience, what is one piece of advice you can share about creating, sustaining, and enabling systems change leadership? Mindful that you obviously spoke about rheumatic fever, Mahi, but I know that you work across other systems change spaces too.
Thanks, Jade. I'm of two minds. I'm like, shall I go there? And I think I will. So I guess, you know, what comes to mind when I see both the questions was kind of that, to be honest, one of our challenges, systems change has become just another buzzword, following collective impact, following co-design. So when we're talking about systems change leadership, even, it just becomes a whole nother, oh, and there's authentic leadership, and there's just so many versions of too many things. And so I think that yeah, the challenge is that we're not just using different words that become so ineffectual. It is about the person, as Jah was sharing, right? It's that individual story of change. Thank you for sharing that, my dear. That how are we, you know, any form of leadership is the ability to tap into that for every person that's in your sphere. And so, you know, I think what's one piece of it is for you as leaders. So I'm just going to address all of you guys, because I'm assuming that you're all on here because you're trying to figure out this form of how you motivate, how you, as Jane was saying before, you know, are you a broker? Are you it's figuring out your own skill in systems change and then using that in whatever way makes sense to mobilize others on that cause, is, I guess, my view of systems change leadership. Because if we're using that term, you know, it can be used multiple ways is the other thing. Like the person who draws together and kind of looks after those mechanics of change on behalf of the collective, they could be termed the systems change leader. However, in my view, everyone's a leader. So everyone, we're trying to get everybody into the space of change in their own style. And my apologies, I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it's actually quite simple. It's about people. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's all about people, whether you're calling it system change leadership or, as you mentioned, authentic leadership. I think I've spoken about servant leadership in the past as well. But yeah, sometimes there are too many words and not enough change. So thank you for addressing that. Jane, do you want to share a bit about your experience?
Yeah, one thing's coming to my heart. The first thing is that our nervous system is our responsibility. I think in the systems change sector or whatever sectors that we're working in, they hold a nervous system. And I think if you're on the ground, if you're working in community, you can find that at the moment, the nervous system is just wild. We're kind of in survival mode, we're responding. It's a lot of that energy. And so if we're able to regulate or celebrate and add some happy energy into the spaces that we work in, I think that will get the vibes up. And I think that's really important. Also, our ability to zoom out is a privilege. And I encourage that if you're able to zoom out, it will help you on your haidinga. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Jade? Yeah, I was reflecting on this pārtai and trying to think over the haringa that has been SASS. What are there some little nuggets that have been really helpful for me in some of those times where I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing and why am I doing it and why do I keep going? And one of them was, you know, this group that has been meeting together regularly, and I would say we dip in and out of that. And I mihi to Anjum and others who've held that consistency, because we all get pretty overwhelmed at times, and so not everybody turns up every time. But we have been consistently meeting and committing to each other in that journey. And as we've shared with each other some of the hard times, one of the ideas that sort of emerged was, who do we have in our lives that we lean with. So all of us have been around long enough, and you need to lean on people for different stages, but this idea that we're leaning with people when things are hard is something that I think is really powerful, and it's something that I think in the scaling deep work that we're doing at SASS, that we're trying to peel back some of those layers, because I read the report and there's some great information in there around, you know, self-care and looking after yourself and seeking support and seeking help. But sometimes I think when we're not in crisis mode, we need to look at what's the infrastructure we put around ourselves as leaders in the systems change space, and who are those people that we know are always there that we get to lean with in situations that actually when it's hard. So that phrase has certainly been one that I've found really helpful, and that I think we're continuing to explore in the SASS context.
Kia ora, Jane. Yeah, from leaning out to leaning in to leaning with. I'm all about the leaning with, and all about getting the vibes up, Jah. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to head to our third question, and if anyone else has any reflections or comments or musings, feel free to pop it in the chat, and we've got a bit of time for your questions in a little bit. But looking ahead, what is your hope for the future for enabling leadership? It doesn't have to be system change leadership, it could just be enabling leadership, but for system change. And actually, this is a collective exercise too. So we've created a bit of a Padlet, which is essentially a fancy Google Doc. It's a bit more visual because I'm a visual person. And hopefully Storm will kindly pop. Oh, actually, I'll just show you. So you click into the Padlet, hopefully it will open up as well. And you can just either push the plus signal down the bottom right-hand corner or just double click on this. And if you have any thoughts or ideas on how you might enable systems change leadership, just pop it here as well. I want to acknowledge Dr. Judy Bruce and Erica, that's also in the audience too, from Leadership Lab, and they've got amazing resources around systems change and a lot of the theory models and frameworks behind system change. And I guess the panel discussion is more actually bringing to the surface the community-led experience of what it might mean around the system change context. So feel free to pop your thoughts in there, or if Padlet's too tricky, pop it in the chat and we can add it in later. But going back to the questions, would love to hear from you, Jah. What's your hope for the future of enabling system change leadership?
I see a realm of dreaming. I think it's a privilege to be able to dream. A realm of like not really rigid shapes. I hope that we can be fluid and embrace or explore our identities and who we're becoming every single day. I think it's such a gift to our tupuna for us to be ourselves in our whole expression, whatever that looks like. And I think I've come to learn that that's quite a courageous thing to do. And so I think, and it's simple, if we can be ourselves in the spaces that we dance in, we're bringing superpowers from our ancestors and bringing essence to wherever we go. And I think that essence is quite magic. And so I encourage all of us today to just keep the coming, just keep learning is one of our terms at Seed Waikato, fail learning. We never really fail, we just keep learning. So tino rangatira, tanga and mana motuhake, standing uniquely and being brave and bold to be yourself. Kia ora, it's my dream.
Beautiful dream, Jah. Superpowers from our ancestors. That gave me wonderful goosebumps. Over to you, Jane or Annie, who would like to speak to, who would like to share their hope for the future.
First of all, I'm still somewhat receiving Jah's wish over all of us, but I'm happy to pick up from that space. And when I was reflecting on this question, for me, I was really keen to think about the work of Aotearoa and what our vision is and what experience the mokopuna of our mokopuna, what we want for them to experience. Our key framework that we operate under for youth development in Aotearoa is called Mana Taiōhi, and it acknowledges the mana of our taiōhi and looks at the ways that youth development approaches can uplift or support or affect that. And my hope is that, and I would love to think we could do this quickly, but it's a marathon, and I do see that it's something we need to build towards. But as we stand on the shoulder of the giants that have gone before us, my hope is that my children's children will live in a world where we don't need a framework that talks about honouring their mana. That they will live in a world where actually the system and the structure and the laws that are being put in place and the honouring of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and other things that are foundational to this nation are such that actually it's easy for us not to just come in missing the realities that our rangatahi are operating in, and to be able to see things in a much more holistic way. And that we're able to do that under Te Tiriti o Waitangi as people that are committed to this nation, to tangata whenua, to our rangatahi. And I could keep going, but I won't. But I hold that, and that's the thing that gets me up in the morning, and that's the thing that keeps me going. Some days when I kind of wonder what the point is. When I'm doing a submission on Monday on Section 7AA of the Oranga Tamariki Act, and I don't know why I'm bothering, I keep going because of that vision. So yeah, that's my hope for the future.
Tēnā koe, Jane. Very, very powerful hope for the future, where we don't need a framework to for people to honour for rangatahi to honour their mana and their coming as their full selves. So thank you so much for sharing. You're amazing, Mahi. Annie, what is your hope for the future? And a friendly reminder, if you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, to pop it in the chat as well.
I agree with Jar and Jane, and particularly for me, because I'm older now. I'm in my 50s, you know. Yes, it can be disheartening to go, whoa, 50 years of my life, and have I seen any change? I definitely would love to be in a place where systems change. Leadership is just not even, we don't have stupid words for sorry, but you know what I mean? Like, we don't need words to have stupid things and ways, as others have said, methodologies that we need for change anymore, that the world is really living to its potential of beautiful people from many different wisdoms, learning, growing, you know, safely challenging, but, you know, and yeah, like all I can see is like heaps and heaps of color and brightness and balloons and you know, and yes, it might sound really you know, childish to be wishing out that way, but my hope remains the same as others have shared, like just we're in a different place and we're in a different time. And I can't even remember what the question was, to be honest, sorry.
The hope for the future, which is beautiful, a bright, colourful, different place, beautiful wisdom from many people's different perspectives and people as well. Sorry, someone's at the door.
And one last thing, and it's about the difference. So difference is treasured. Difference is treasured and valued, I think, is going to be a cool place. Anyone else want to say a few words as Jade has had to step away for a moment? Any questions? Anyone want to jump into space and just like share thoughts, feelings, questions? Jade, while you step away, go ahead, Joss.
Hello, Annie. Thank you for inviting us to speak. I've been listening and I find it all very interesting. I would like to pick up on something that Jahvaya said, to be engaged. She said, I suddenly knew how I could be engaged. And I think that is so crucial, because whenever I speak with another person and have a conversation with another person, I need that engagement to have a connection. And when we talk with children or adults, anyone, you need to understand how they work, how they learn. What do I need to do as a good leader or a teacher to get them involved? I need to know what makes them engaged. And that's different for different individuals. So I suppose every connection starts with listening. Where does this person come from? How does this person think? How does this person work inside himself, herself? And from there on, you might be able to give this person support to go in a direction where this person will naturally want to go because of the way this person has been made up. So I suppose leadership is maybe just very carefully listening and supporting rather than telling what to do, or saying this is the right way. I don't know. Anyway, this is some of the stuff that I'm thinking.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Joss.
You're welcome.
Leadership is very much more about coaching and asking good questions than it is about telling and, waving the flag at the front. I'm also mindful of time. Ja or Jane or Annie, do you want to respond to Joss's reflections? And then there's a couple of parts in the chat.
Yeah, I would love to. I think on my journey, especially when I was in the Lions Club, I really became a next level listener. I became super hyper aware. I think what we find in those spaces is that often there is a difference in privilege and perhaps social awareness, but also in a lot of loneliness as well. And I felt as though in a lot of spaces, my listening did get taken for granted because of how that interaction can be happening. Sometimes people just love that listening, but what it taught me in those spaces of intense full body listening was I would get to a point in my listening journey where I would become tired of listening and I would get sick of listening, that I would keep enduring to listen, to practice widening my listening span. And so when I feel that awareness within myself of my listening span, I always try to increase it. And so that really helped. But I agree. I think now I will know if people are listening to me based on interactions and situations and also how people are responding to me when I'm talking. And I think if you operate in a lot of facilitative spaces as well, getting people to clap or click can also show their level of listening when they're engaging in full body exercises. And so I just like to engage in those listening exercises, and I think it's an amazing tip. And it's also really important that people can understand that listening goes both ways. It is reciprocal. And by listening today, it's actually co-creating this space because we'll be taking and sharing as well. So this is a co-creation too.
I'm all about the clicks. Also just mindful of time, and Erin probably needs to disappear at 1 as well. I'd like to end off with one question, but in response to your question, Ruth, you've disappeared now. But the best way to learn about system change is lots of free resources online. But the best one that I've come across most recently is that Leadership Lab created a series of system change webinars, and I've popped it in the chat, but I'll also pop it in the Padlet for people to have a look at. But let's end off with this one. How do you look after yourself as system change leaders? Is there a tip? Tips. Maybe one tip to end off with, and then we'll jump back to the slides and end with a karakia. Maybe I'll start with you, Annie, if you don't mind. And then go Jane.
Family and friends, thanks Jade, will tell you I am the very worst person to ask this question on. And that is because I expect all of us, we're so passionate, you've heard everybody share today, it's hard to turn it off. But one of the things that has helped me has been some advice from my husband, who told me there are very few things in life that truly cannot wait for tomorrow. So it's that thing of actually us taking the pressure off ourselves and limiting what we can truly do of meaning and value and the time span of, say, a workday as an example. Thanks.
Annie. Jane?
I think I know a lot of answers to this question, but I don't know that they always settle down into my spirit and my heart and come through in my actions. But the one that has risen to the surface, and like Annie, 50 years through my life, it's taken me this long to feel a connection to the whenua that comes so intuitively to my Indigenous whānau. So yeah, connection to the whenua, getting your feet on the ground, getting your feet in the sand, getting your feet wet, for me anyway, has increasingly become one of those things that is so important for to care for myself. Over to you, Jah.
Kia ora. For me, I think at work I'm always like here, so I like to move into my body, dance, shake it out, like do dancing, and also finding time to laugh is my favorite thing, because everything these days can be so serious. So I'm like, if you have a buddy or an auntie or a cousin that makes you crack up, just keep laughing with them.
Oh, kia ora, thank you. Yeah, I have a very funny hubby. It's like, you take life too seriously, Jade. We gotta laugh every now and then. But ngā mihi, and thank you. Thank you to our wonderful speakers, your whakaaro and words of wisdom and lived experience and expertise that were shared. Thank you to the tech team behind the scenes. That doesn't just happen. So a huge thanks to Storm for wrangling us and making sure that it all works as well in Lotelea. And thank you to you all for spending your lunchtime with us and co-creating this space. Friendly reminder, we do have some other lunchtime learnings coming up over the next few months. Again, feel free to either subscribe to the Inclusive Aotearoa newsletter or follow us on Humanitics, which is where you registered for this session. And apologies, we've run out of time today, but let's close with the karakia. And any thoughts or questions that you have, feel free to pop it in the chat and we'll save the chat for later. Okay, me karakia tātou. Ka whakairia te tapu kia wātea ai te ara, kia turiki whakataha ai, kia turiki whakataha ai, haumie huie, taiki e. Thank you.